Yeah, well, I know a guy that would be able to answer all those questions for us, and he does some really, really good work. And he joined us already a couple weeks ago, and now we get to talk to him post NFL Combine, and that is the man, the Detroit Lions and NFL Draft Analyst at DetroitLionsPodcast.com. You can check him out. Actually, Russ does a great job. Him and Bischoff and Russell Brown, they do a good show as well. So all your draft coverage, check them out, Detroit Lions Podcast. Let's bring him into the show. Mr. Scott Bischoff. Scott, how we doing?
I'm doing pretty well. How are you guys?
We are great. Scott, we got to go to the Combine, and we want to pick your brain on a lot of these guys because it seems like, especially with this defensive line class, there's a lot. There's a lot of good players. And you're seeing the conversation. It's like through the first 60 picks, you could have, roughly 1/3 just be defensive linemen. That's basically what a lot of the consensus is. And I would love to pick your brain on a couple of – I'll start with the first one, a player that I really like, and I'd love to ask you about him because there are these question marks. It happens during draft time. I mean, you've been doing this a while. You know how this works. A player like James Pierce, who tests extremely well. He's productive. He has a crazy pass rush win rate. He's about 240-ish pounds. So maybe that's the frame that people are talking about. But two questions. One, what your thoughts on the player? But two, is he a player that you think could be in range to where he falls maybe in those teens to where the Lions, they'd have to give up some stuff, but go up and get a player like that? What do you think of a guy like James Pierce?
So he's a very linear player. He's got a strange body. 6'5", 240, over 240 pounds. Really good get off, but there's not. He's stiff in his hips. He's very tight hipped. So, I guess the question is, does he fit the Lions? Right. I think that's kind of where everybody is with him. I don't think he does. There's a couple of things. I don't know that he's physical enough. He's a really good run defender. He's kind of an enigma. He's a very good run defender for a player who's kind of like needs to add some bulk to his body. He's a really good run defender. He's more of a passive pass rusher, and there's not a lot to see from him from like a technique standpoint. If he wins with quickness and speed outside, he's good. Like I said, he does struggle a little bit to bend at the top of his rush, but he's raw as a pass rusher. And then there's the off the field stuff that makes you wonder, like, are the Lions even remotely interested in this guy? And my guess is if I were to bet money on it, I would say he's not on the Lions draft board for a lot of, it sounds like he's kind of a difficult personality. Maybe not the most coach. That's the word that was thrown around. Is he's not a overly coachable kind of player, but I do think that he would likely be available in the teens like you're talking about. I just don't know. I don't know if he presents what the Lions are looking for at the edge position.
Hey, yeah, I think that's fair, Scott. Just following up with the edge stuff, especially at 28, knowing how kind of after the combine, getting a little feel on how things might fall. Obviously, we don't know 100% every year how it's going to fall. But guys at 28, especially off the edge, that you think will be available. I've brought up guys like Donovan Izuroku. We've talked about potentially, I know Shamar Stewart had such a good combine, but if he falls, who are a couple of guys, especially, I really want to know a little bit about Donovan Izuroku because I've been on him for a couple of weeks now. And then other guys as well at 28 that you think the Lions are going to kind of target.
So if Izuroku is available at 28, I would hope the Lions would just sort of get out of their own way with some of the requirements around size. The nice thing about Izuroku is he's 6'2.5", 248 pounds. So he's not like he's really super small, but he does have 34-inch arms. So he gives you the length that you're looking for. But with him, you're getting a pass rush arsenal. I don't want to overstate it, but he might have the best pass rush arsenal of all the pass rushers in this class.
There we go.
From the get off and the bend at the top of the rush, and you can see that in the short shuttle he ran. Is either 3-cone or the short shuttle? He ran like a 6.94, which is pretty elite. For pass rushers, that's a great number. I think he was the best one at the combine for that particular drill. But you can see all that stuff, and he's got great hand usage. He's got all the moves. He's got the Euro step. He's got the ghost move. He's got it all, and he plays with natural leverage. He's up under tackles very quickly because he's shorter than they are. And he's got long arms, so he can move them backwards. But he's got a plan. Like he has an idea how he's going to defeat blocks. To me, a month ago he was like, he was the crush a month ago, the guy that I was writing letters to in the middle of the night, right? Like, but he's that real bendy guy who I think is a really toolsy pass rusher. It's just, are they gonna reject him because of the size requirements? He does play the run. He does give effort. There's none of that stuff. So, I would hope that they would be enamored enough with him to take him. But the problem is in this class, I can't see him being available at 28. The Shamar Stewart thing is, it was a dream for a couple of days that he might have fallen into the 20s and you could trade up for him. Not anymore. He's just, as big as he is. And I know that he's only had 4.5 sacks in his career. He's got some footwork stuff that he needs to figure out, but he's so productive against the run. And the pass rush stuff will come with him. He reminds me a lot of Calais Campbell. It just, it's in this draft. This is not a great top heavy draft. And there are not quarterbacks and a bunch of wide receivers who are stuffed into the top 10, where you feel like some players are going to fall into positions where they maybe shouldn't. And then you guys were talking about the same thing coming in. I mean, there's no tackles really that are going to put themselves in those positions either. So I kind of feel like these edge rushers, the ones that are really toolsy or the ones that have high upside, are going to be gone and long gone before the Lions can really get involved, which is a bummer. But this is the class.
And Scott, this isn't so much Lion related, but I feel like it's a big domino in the draft where teams are going to be looking to see how this falls. And that's the quarterback situation. When you look at Cam Ward, when you look at Shedeur Sanders, even when you look at Jackson Dart and Jalen Milroe, there's some mock drafts out there, Scott, where people are putting Jalen Milroe in the first round of the Detroit Lions. And I'm like, huh? But people are buying into the Jalen Milroe stock. When you look at this quarterback class, how do you think they separate 1, 2, 3, 4? Or just what's your opinion on this class as a whole?
It's very much, it's a class that would have kind of fit in. I would say there were probably 5 quarterbacks in last year's class that nobody in this class would have reached. And then it would have been, is Cam Ward, do you want to take Cam Ward over Bo Nix kind of thing? Cam Ward to me is quarterback 1 in this class. I think the Giants are going to try to trade up for him or are actively trying to do that right now. I don't know what Tennessee's going to do. I don't know what Cleveland's going to do. The Shedeur Sanders stuff feels a lot like there are a few teams putting stuff out there to kind of get him to fall a little bit. But, he is more of a system quarterback than some of the other players. So, I would expect Cam Ward to be sort of the prize at the top of the draft. My assumption is the Giants are going to try to get there. And then does Cleveland take one? If it's not Cam Ward, I can't see them in the weather. Shedeur doesn't have a big arm, right? So there's some of that. It's like there's a little Goff in his game do you think, how would Goff play in Cleveland? How would that look, right?
I don't think any quarterback thrives in Cleveland, Scott.
Yeah. So you need something more than whatever this class offers. But I think Dart will probably rise and be a first round pick. It feels to me like Las Vegas is a spot where they're begging for Shedeur to be available to them. And that's some of the stuff that you're hearing around him falling. And that could happen. But that's kind of I don't think the Milroe in round 1 thing is a thing. But the other 3, I think, because it's a bad class and, some teams are just starved for quarterback play, I could see Dart ascending and maybe getting drafted by a team like Cleveland or, somebody needing to jump up, maybe it's the Jets. I don't know. It's still it's a strange situation with these quarterbacks, but I think Cam Ward is pretty clear in a way right now, quarterback one.
A prospect, I think a very interesting prospect, and I've been trying to do more research on this player because we've seen him play, and he shows up in big moments. And I think people with pass rushers or really positions in general, everyone's upset, and rightfully so to some extent, but obsessed with upside. But when you have a play, especially late in the first, if you can get a guy with a high floor, he's just going to be productive for you and be a really good football player. I'm actually not opposed to that. People are, and I get it. A player like Jack Sawyer, I think that's the big thing is like, what's his ceiling rather than what's his floor? And then you saw the hand size come out. And what do you make of a player like Jack Sawyer? Because I like him. We all like him. But people tend to be like, if they ever see him at 28, it's like, oh God, where are you at with a guy like Jack Sawyer? What would you be comfortable at 28, or is he more of a secure second round guy?
I think he's a guy that you would take at pick 60, understanding that his floor is cool, but there's not a ton of upside with him as a player. To me, watching him, I think he's kind of maxed out. So, he is what he is at this point in time. I don't know that he's got a frame where you're going to add a lot of bulk. So, he's lived on the end of that defensive line, kind of bullying tight ends and winning in the Big Ten. I just think that because there's not much ceiling there, and he doesn't win at a high rate as a pass rusher already, if you take that in round 2 and you just accept it and say he's going to defend the run and he's going to give us everything he's got, I think that's fine. There are other players who I would think, like Nick Scorton from Texas A&M is a good example of a player who 2 weeks ago I compared him to like Josh Pascal light, right? But that's after watching him this year at Texas A&M at 280 pounds. So then when I hear him talk at the combine about how things are just very different at A&M, and he comes in and he measures what he measures, which is 257. And then I go back 2 years ago to watch the Purdue film, and he looks like a totally different guy, a much more twitched up version of himself. I think that's a guy that you would take at 28 because he will defend the run. He will be physical. It's just what can you extract out of him as a pass rusher? So there's in this class, I think, like, I guess to answer your question, there's a bunch of guys like Jack Sawyer who I think will fall and be there at say pick 60. But at pick 28, I mean, I get what you're saying. It's just you want some pass rush upside.
Scott, do you think in some conversation we have a lot when we did our mock draft Mondays yesterday, and the conversation we have all the time is like these picks outside of the first 2 rounds, like third, fourth, fifth, sixth round, seventh with Brad Holmes, like he finds all of these sleepers. I'm putting you on the spot a little here just because I kind of want to know if you have any sleepers that you're like, hey, this is a Brad Holmes guy that you can get, let's say, in the second half of the draft this year. Is there any guys that just instantly come out and you're like, yep, that's a Brad Holmes guy that you're going to find in the 5th or 6th round?
The guy that stood out to me at the combine, even before, and he just stinks as a Lions kind of player, is the Boise State edge from Egypt.
Oh, come on, Scott.
We loved him.
Yeah.
We loved him.
So 6'2", 267. When you watch him play, there are things that he already naturally does, the instincts that he already has that you can't necessarily teach. So there are things he does where you say, wow, that's really impressive. But then you look at his stance and it's like, I can't believe nobody's fixed this. His feet, there's really no stagger to his feet. So he's always really late off the ball. But having said that, he wins all the time. He's pretty good at understanding how not to be blocked. He gives you every bit of effort that you could possibly want. He's powerful. He'll defend the run. He'll take on blocks. He does all that stuff. I think you're taking that guy maybe round 3, round 4 as a developmental player. But yeah, that's a guy who I think just reeks Lions prospect. I
just want to throw this out there. Another guy like that I've been really big on, Ty Robinson. What are your thoughts on him? I've loved him. He looked great at the combine.
Yeah. I mean, another guy who I think fits what they do. it's interesting because you guys mentioned it. The D-line class is loaded. This draft is going to be driven by running backs, tight ends, and defensive linemen, and everything else is a little bit like, he's a good player. I think he's a good prospect. It's just, where do these guys all fall? I don't know exactly how many defensive linemen are going to go, but it's going to be a lot. It's a really loaded class there.
And Scott, kind of going off that with the sleepers, you gave us Max Melton last year, and he ended up having a great rookie season for the Cardinals. It looked like their cornerback won at some points. When you look at this cornerback class, me and Boone, we really like Darian Porter out of Iowa State. Is there any corners that you think the Lions might be looking at when you talk about, possibly day one if they really want to in the first round, but kind of rounds 2 through 7? Are there any corners that stick out to you that could be like, okay, this is a Lions guy?
I was going to talk about Porter.
There we go. All right, perfect. What do you think about him?
6-year player, older player, right? Big. He's 6'3", he's 195. I think people are going to want to try to naturally compare him to Tariq Woolen from Seattle. Again, he's an older player who only started for 1 year, but really good tester. Obviously, I think he would be a special teams monster for you. And then it's kind of figuring out, is he a zone corner? Is he a man corner? I think he needs development in kind of everywhere. Certainly height, weight, speed guy. I think that makes some sense. Something that nobody's really talked about in round 1 is what do the Lions do if a player like Jahdae Barron falls to I don't think he will. I don't think he should, but Texas's corner, I think he's more of a nickel cornerback than an outside cornerback. But to me, there's a lot of value in the nickel position. And I think he's got really good tools, very good instincts. He's really good in coverage. That might be one of those kind of off the ball or off the wall kind of swings where you go, wow, I didn't see that coming, them taking another corner. But the problem with this draft is at pick 28, everything's going to be empty by that point. So you're going to have to find something that you like, and maybe they have a bigger grade on him than we think. A player like that, I'm not saying him exactly, but something like that where nobody expects them to take a corner at 28 and they do, right? So there's a big corner we talked about in Porter, and then there's a smaller one there with Barron. It's going to be interesting how this draft plays out. I think Jahad Campbell should be in the conversation for pick 28. I don't know that he gets there either, just because of what he can do. He's a better blitzer than pass rusher. At Alabama, he's pretty good in coverage. He's not great in coverage right now, but he's good enough where you could feel comfortable developing him. Absolute blistering sideline to sideline speed. He's got all that stuff. He's got heavy hands. He hits. He does everything. He kind of does everything at a pretty high level, which is why I don't think he'll be there. But that's another position where would they really take like a Sam linebacker at 28? And it's like, well, we need to open ourselves up to the possibility that, yeah, we all want them to take an edge or two or a defensive tackle, right? But those positions might empty out at the top more sooner than we think. So you got to take somebody, and you're going to end up taking a player that you have graded highest left. So, just some thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think the conversation right now with Jahad Campbell's interesting. I know people are okay with it at 28. I mean, I wouldn't mind it. I think he agreed with you. I don't think he'll be there at 28. I think another player that I've started to fall more in love with, and he's someone you could probably get, I would say 3rd round. We'll see what happens. You never know with the draft. But another player I think could play that Sam spot, and I would love to know your thoughts on him. Barrett Carter, the linebacker out of Clemson. Everything I've watched out of him, they love him. I know there's the missed tackle thing, but overall, in terms of blitzing, he's versatile. What are your thoughts on a guy like Barrett Carter as another kind of Sam linebacker option besides Jahad, who will probably be gone?
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you. Jahad will likely be gone. Any player you get in round 3 you're going to have to develop a little bit. He can do everything. You could drop him into coverage. He's fine, right? I think he'll give you less from the blitzing standpoint of things than what a player like like Campbell does, but again, it's round 3. So I like him. I think, a lot of those guys that played, a lot of the Sam linebacker prospects in college sometimes aren't necessarily Sam linebacker prospects in the NFL, because in the NFL, you're asked to do more in coverage, dropping away from the ball. So therein lies, that's one of the big questions around some of these guys is, are they comfortable moving away from the line of scrimmage? Right.
Right.
Yes, the guy you mentioned is fine, and he'd be a nice option. He is one of the guys who I think that could give you some pass rush, give you some blitz, and you need that opposite Hutchinson, and you almost got to scheme it up for him.
Do you think as well, Scott, that in something I've been hammering on my mock drafts is adding another weapon to this offense, especially with the Tim Patrick situation. And honestly, and I would love to hear your thoughts on this. I had a thought process with how deep this running back class is, with Craig Reynolds as your RB3 to pick up a running back later in the draft as well. Do you kind of see the Lions and Brad going those ways with even a wide receiver, a running back later in the draft? And if you do see that, what guys do you see them grabbing?
So I don't know if it would be later in the draft, but I think a guy like Jaden Higgins from Iowa State.
Love him. Let's go.
He is. Where is he at? I have him on my list that I wanted to talk about. I want to say he's 6'4" and 215.
Yep.
6'4", 214. He's fast. He runs really good routes. He wins on the boundary. He's a better route runner than anybody thinks he is. Pretty dynamic player. But I think you're investing a second-round pick in him, and I think it's a reach to think that he will be there at 60. So are you willing to trade up for a receiver, but he would complete the offense? That's your yoked up Tim Patrick in the Lions offense. So you put him on the outside as your backside X. You have Jamison Williams running around and just creating havoc. Amon-Ra feasting, Laporta, so do I see Holmes doing that? Yeah, I could see him doing that. It's a way to keep the offense rolling, kind of playing ahead of the curve there. I think it would make a lot of sense.
And Scott, we've been hammering the defensive edge spot, but I think it's just so imperative. And like you said, if the Lions, if they don't go defensive end in round 1 or round 2, some guys that I think could be there that I really like, and I'm interested to get your opinion on 2 of them. Both of them were at the combine. One of them I was impressed with. The other one I really wasn't. The one that I was not was Jared Ivey. Again, I'm not going to say that he should be off Lions draft stock if he wasn't there already, but I didn't think he performed particularly well. And another one that I love that I thought did very well was Jordan Burch. When you look at Jared Ivey and Jordan Burch, what are your opinion on those 2 defensive ends?
So a couple weeks ago, I did one of these and I talked about Ivey being potentially a possibility at 28. And with the thought in mind that when you watch Ole Miss, they ask their defensive players to very passively sort of hang around near the line of scrimmage and almost take read steps where they're not asking them to get up the field. So, giving them some, because they both do it. Princely Uman-Milan does it too. And it seems to be an Ole Miss thing where these guys do not come off the ball aggressively. They're just kind of like reading things and then they go. So I think the problem with Ivey is big and heavy. And right, it's tough in a situation where you guys are at the combine watching him move. And it's tough to compare him moving at 200 and I don't even know what he was, 275 or 280, whatever he was. That moves a lot different than a guy in the 250s or the 240s. And it stands out. He may have appeared a little sluggish. He did not run the 40. I'm not really sure what's going on there with him, but there's a slipperiness to his game, which is strange because he's so big, where he can, if you were to condense him down and say, play him as a 3 tech in passing down situations, he could be very productive in that kind of an environment because he has heavy hands and he's willing to use them and all that stuff. I think that he would end up being a fine power edge kind of defensive end. I think in hindsight, looking at his testing and checking out this class some more, I think 28's rich for what he is. But I mean, I understand why you would not like him looking at what he looked like on the hoof down there. Birch is a different story. I think he's a little more explosive. There's two guys at Oregon, I think, that stand out as potential Lions guys. Derek Harmon, the 3-tech, would be a very nice pick at 28. And Birch, to me, is a developmental player. I think there's plenty of in his tank as far as being an edge player to like and to want to bring here. Given where are we at in the draft where he goes, he makes sense. I like him.
Go ahead, Boone.
Yeah, I just got one more question. And this is kind of regards, it's really not even Lions. It's more so just early, like kind of first round draft picks. We had the conversation last night about all of these tackles in this draft and kind of how, there's these guys like Will Campbell, a little smaller, that, hey, he should be playing guard. What are your thoughts on these tackles in the first round? Like, how do you see them kind of coming off the board? And where do you see like this whole situation, whether some of these guys should kind of move around positions?
I mean, the arm length thing is a thing for a reason, right? If you have short arms and you don't move your feet well, you could never live outside as a tackle. Campbell moves his feet fine, but he's such an outlier from the arm length and the wingspan that it makes you think that it's really going to be tough for him to survive on the edge. So I think he'll have to go inside to play guard. As far as the tackles go, I think it's going to be Membo is going to be the first tackle, probably earlier than we think. And then it's going to be a collection of like, where does Josh Simmons go? He's the only pure sort of player that as a tackle, but he's coming off of a big surgery, and maybe he makes a team comfortable with his recovery and they make that pick there. Outside of that, you got a bunch of guys in Kelvin Banks. You have Will Campbell. There's a bunch of guys who fit in that, where I don't know that they're going to play outside, but they might play inside at a pretty high level. There are two players I think that the Lions fans probably need to get to know a little bit. Donovan Jackson from Ohio State, who kicked out and went from guard to play tackle for them. And he played at a really high level. So, this is a guy who made himself some money this year. If you draft him, you're drafting a really, really good football player who has the ability to play both guard and tackle. Now, do you want him to play tackle? Not necessarily, but he can. And I think he can play guard at a high level. And the other one is Gray Zabel from North Dakota State. If you're taking him at 28, I don't think there's any chance that you think he's a tackle. I think it's more he plays guard for a couple of years until Frank Ragnow decides it's time for him to go. And Zabel is your center of the future. That's kind of the way that whole thing goes. Like if you were to really evaluate Will Campbell specifically, I think Will Campbell's transition is going to be there. Somebody's going to draft him, try him at tackle, play him at guard, and he's going to end up as a center, much like Graham Barton did last year coming from Duke and when he went to Tampa Bay. Now, Barton wasn't being talked about in the top 5 like Campbell was, but the limitations are what they are. And I think Will Campbell could be a very good guard and probably an elite center. It's just, what's the draft capital? What's the cost of taking that guy, knowing that he's not really going to play on the edge for you?
Mm-hmm. Well, we appreciate your time as always, Scott. And again, check out Scott at Bischoff_Scott. Check out his stuff on DetroitLionsPodcast.com. We appreciate your time as always. Staying a little later for us. We do appreciate it. But thank you, Scott. You're the man.
Appreciate it, Scott.
There you go.
Next time.
There you go. Let's make it happen. Mr. Scott Bischoff joining the fellas, talking some ball, talking some prospects. And hey, what's going on there? It's Jeff Iafrate. Appreciate you for finishing the video. You can check out one of the videos here suggested or show support by commenting, liking, and subscribing. And buy your merchandise, FisherCTSports.com.